I'm Megha Bhatia this side, and in this particular video, we'll be talking about how to decide the name for your podcast. Whenever you're deciding the name for your podcast, it is like one of the most important things जब आप अपना podcast पूरा plan out कर रहे हो. So when you're deciding the name for your podcast, the first important thing is that it should be easy to remember. It should be crisp and it should not be too long. What you can do is when you're deciding the name for your podcast, do a little bit of market research. Go to Spotify, go to platforms like Hubhopper, check what are the podcasts that are already available related to your niche. For example, when I was deciding the name for my podcast, I went to Spotify, I went to Hubhopper, I researched about all the podcasts that were available related to self-love. And I checked कि सारे podcasts जो available है, it is for 15 minutes, it is for 20 minutes. And there were no podcasts which were basically bite-sized podcasts. So I decided that I'm going to keep the name of my podcast as Self-Love in 60 seconds. And it is so easy to remember as well as it contains the word self-love. So people can resonate with it. Any person who's looking for content related to self-love, they can easily click on it and they can figure out what is the podcast all about. So when you're deciding the name for your podcast, it should be easy to remember. It should also resonate with your theme. So I'm going to give you an example of a podcast which I really love. It is a podcast by the name of The Habit Coach. So the name is so simple and yet anybody from the audience can easily figure out that that person is going to talk about habits. So you can also ensure कि जो आपकी niche है, habits, sports or podcasting related to motivation, you can have that word in your podcast name. It is not compulsory to have that word in the podcast name, but it is preferred because when people are searching for that particular thing, like if I'm searching for motivation on Spotify, I might figure out your podcast and it will come on the search options, like top 2-3 search options. Or you can be creative and you can completely decide a new name for your podcast, which is something out of the box and it is easy to remember. So first is easy to remember, something which is eye-catchy, something which is related to your niche. At the same time, when you're deciding the name for your podcast, it is so important that you don't copy paste someone else's YouTube name and put it as your podcast name. It should be unique and it should be coming from your mind, okay? And you can be as creative as you want. Avoid like huge names, large names to लोग remember भी ना कर पाए. Avoid names जो कि बहुत difficult to pronounce है. And if, for example, I heard a podcast and if I have to tell my friends about it, यार मैंने वो podcast सुना था and मैं नाम ही भूल गई. So it's important. It should be crisp, easy to remember. At the same time, जब आप name decide कर रहे हो, it's like your first encounter with your audience. So it is important that audience remember it. कई बारी we feel that you might come up with a lot of names, okay, and you might feel, wow, this is like one of the most unique name and nobody might be having a podcast related to that. I also remember once my sister came to me to insist and she was like, I have got the perfect name for my podcast. I was like, okay, tell me the name. She was like, Namaste India. मैंने कहा स्वाति, that's the most common name and there might be a lot of podcasts related to it. So even if you're coming up with 2-3 names, you can always take feedbacks from your friends and family members. Consult them whether that podcast name is good or not. Because with name of the podcast, it's like you can change the cover art for your podcast. You can change the content of episodes of the podcast. But name change karna, it's like not possible. It is possible, but name is like something which you should stick to. Like it should be the same अपनी पूरी podcasting journey में. So जब आप name decide करें, I would say take up a sheet, write all the names that are coming in your mind. Check if it's easy, it's crisp, it's easy to remember, people are able to resonate with it, and are you able to resonate with it? So once you're able to tick these सारे pointers, then go forward with the name. Start a podcast today. The app that I strongly recommend is Hubhopper app because it's absolutely free. This video is not sponsored by them, but मैंने अपनी podcasting journey Hubhopper के साथ start करी थी, so it was beautiful. And I'm still using Hubhopper as a hosting platform. So what are you waiting for? So now you know how to decide the name for your podcast. You know how to decide or design the cover art for your podcast. If you have any other questions related to deciding the name for your podcast, mention in the comment section and I'll be happy to help you with it. Till then, take care and happy podcasting.